So, as promised, it's time for some more power rankings. We've had 1 month of play, we've had the first tournament, we're through the main melee now, I did some power rankings prior to the season starting, and now we can re-look and make some changes after what we've seen in this first month of play. And of course, nothing is linear in the Overwatch League, not unless it's the San Francisco Shock in the previous 2 seasons where, well, you normally have this sort of framework to build from, but this month has been rather surprising, and it's going to mean quite a few changes to my previous power rankings, especially in one region. However, we are going to start off with the East region in this one, and the East region has seen some surprising stuff. Now, my power rankings are going to look slightly different to what the May Melee final standings were, because they'll be probably closer to what the standings are now, after the May Melee points have been given, which makes a massive difference to some people's standings, not gonna lie. And I'm doing this out of my honest gut feeling of where I think the teams are. One of the teams I think people might think are a little low, but I have a belief that they are down there right now. And another team that people might think are a little high. But again, I still think and believe that that team is significantly improving. And so that's why I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and placing them a little higher than perhaps I would have maybe a week and a half ago. So yeah, it's going to be super interesting. Let's get into this though. East region first. Next time we will do the West region, which is obviously chunkier. And the West region will see quite a few more changes compared to what we saw in the previous power rankings I did before the season started. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. Let's get it underway, shall we? So, as ever, we're going to work from bottom to top, because, you know, why would you spoil the first place when you can go from bottom to top and make people watch the video longer? Yes, that's how YouTube works. Yeah, I know, it's bad, isn't it? But hey, watch time matters. So, at the bottom of the standings for my East power rankings, of course, it is the Immortals Valiant. Now, the Valiant have shown more promise than expected, especially from Shocheng and Mo Lanran. But they carry them in certain fights against certain teams. But at the end of the day, they do end up losing. They are winless, have only put one map on the board in this May Melee, never made it to the tournament quite obviously, and are bottom of the standings. Valiant are still by far the worst team in the region, and they got pummeled by Guangzhou. So it is, I don't know anyone who would put Valiant any higher than 8th and bottom of the East standings. And if you do, I'm not gonna lie, you're probably a little crazy. I don't see where the wins are coming from for the Valiant, and especially as people like Guangzhou are making changes to their coaching staff, which is going to make them a tougher prospect, hopefully, in the coming weeks. And that just means that the Valiant continue to fall behind, and therefore get left behind. So that's where the Valiant stand right now. In the 7th place, I am going to slot Guangzhou. Now, I think this could change, simply because Guangzhou have got rid of their coaching staff and are going to invest in new ones. This can make a big difference. Either way, it could make the Guangzhou charge worse, which I doubt whether it will, to be quite honest, or it could make them better. And I think the main lack for the Guangzhou charge was in the coaching area. I don't think it was necessarily because they have bad players, full stop. Jihan is acceptable, Rio is okay, Krong is a great off-tank. You know, you've got plenty of great players in the Guangzhou charge. They just need a direction, and they need coaching to send them in the correct direction. And if the right coaches are found by the Guangzhou charge, then I think they will actually excel and really improve. Problem is, who are those coaches going to be? Because, okay, we just, Hangzhou Spark have got rid of Pajion, right? So it could be end up being Pajion, but look what he did with the Spark. It didn't really work, did it? So, are we expecting any different at the Guangzhou charge? Possibly not. So the Guangzhou charge are in a sticky place. If they find a good coach, then they could go higher. But at the moment, I'm not willing to bet on the fact that they find a good enough coach to propel them up the standings. And so that's why I'm putting them in 7th at the moment. And I'm putting them just behind New York. New York are in 6th. New York, they're a weird one. There's a little bit of consistency issues for New York, and there's a little bit of growing to do. It's what we expected with New York in some respects. They're a massively young team with just Ivy and Jonak to guide them, and that's going to take time. It's much like the London Spitfire from last season, although it's doing better than that squad was doing. I think we can all agree. So, I think New York are in a good place to grow, but it's going to take a long time. That's for sure. We've seen good moments from the likes of Flora, and etc. It's just not consistent, and that's worrying. They can be very good or they can be really bad, and that's not great. Over time, I'm hoping they'll find that consistency, because New York can go toe-to-toe with some of the best, but only on their day. They can't do it consistently, so that means they can't go up with the likes of Shanghai and Philadelphia and stick with them. And therefore they end up losing out in the series. However, when you look at New York, yeah, they got swept by Chengdu, but they did manage to beat Hangzhou 3-1. And yeah, they got swept by Seoul and they got swept by Shanghai, but there were glimmers of good play. Glimmers of good play, I think is what we can say. So yeah, a 1-3 record is not great. Picking up only 3 maps is not great. But I think there is potential in this New York side. Guangzhou, though, if they get the right coaches, can be better. And Guangzhou are above them in the standings right now, albeit by 1 map, because Guangzhou drew a map instead of lost. So New York is going to be an interesting one to monitor over the coming weeks and months. It's going to take a long time, and New York fans are going to have a lot of patience. But I still think it's a model that can work. So above New York, this is where we probably get a little bit weird. In 5th, I've got Chengdu. Now, that is a weird one, considering they got to the May Melee finals, right? But I think the May Melee finals exposed their weakness in the Chengdu Hunters that will get exploited as the season goes on. And that's their ability, first of all, to get outdone by if the other team has pure mechanical skill. Hence they lost to Philly. And I don't think the Shanghai Dragons will slip up against Chengdu like they did in the first week. We have to also always take the first week with a pinch of salt, because the first week can always have some really erroneous results. Just like San Francisco back in 2020, when they lost to both LA teams in the first week and then went on to storm people. It can be a very weird week to try and garner any sort of idea from. And that's when Chengdu swept the Shanghai Dragons. Now, Shanghai, if they can consistently play at the level that they've been playing at in the lead up to the May Melee tournament, the knockouts leading up to the Melee tournament, and in the May Melee Grand Finals themselves, then Shanghai will be the best in the region. Or one of the best. They'll be up there competing with Philly. And that is the question. Can they maintain that in the regular season, or are they going to do more of what Seoul did last season? Make sure they scrape in, because remember they qualified for the May Melee in 4th place into those knockouts, behind Chengdu, Seoul and Philly. If they could go on that sort of run where they continuously slip into those playoffs and then storm the playoffs when they get into them. That's what Seoul did last season, and again, it's a formula that works. It'd be interesting to see what happens. But again, if you're ranking them on power, then if they have the ability to turn up in playoffs and beat the best, which Shanghai did apart from Dallas, then that makes Shanghai the best in the East. Am I not incorrect? So it's a weird thing with Chengdu, and this is what separates them from the best, because they are better than they've ever been. I don't think we can argue with that, but I also think they're counterable. And as long as teams don't get drawn into the Chengdu Hunters game, then they will be fine. And Chengdu are actually victims of this themselves when you look at their results. Because, okay, Chengdu, 4 matches, right? They go in first week, they beat the Valiant 3-1, they beat Shanghai 3-0, second week they beat New York 3-0, and they lose to Philadelphia 3-1. Now, what's the erroneous thing here? Well, Philadelphia Fusion were better mechanically and didn't get drawn into the Chengdu Hunters game, played their game, Philly ran the brawl and completely ran over them. Chengdu are massively, massively weak on brawl. But the outlier is the Valiant match. And that is what bugs me. They were able to beat a New York Excelsior side, they were able to beat a Shanghai Dragons side. They're nice organized teams because they can pick them apart. That's what Chengdu do. Their chaos picks teams apart. But when they were met with chaos, when they were met with the Valiant, they dropped a map. The only map that Valiant have won this entire season so far. And that bugs me. And so, if people go into this like Philly did, then I believe Chengdu will start to fall off, because I think they will struggle and they will start to get countered and they won't be able to keep up and be meta chameleons and be able to bridge metas. I think they will be a little bit odd. The team that Chengdu always were. The team that can surprise you, but only if you get drawn into their game. Only if you get drawn into the chaos. That's what Chengdu always used to be. And I think that's what they might be returning to this season. They were caught catching people off in the main melee. I don't think that will last going into the June Joust and further forward. And so that's why I'm not willing to back the Chengdu Hunters too much. And in fourth place, I have put Hangzhou Spark above them. Hangzhou Spark, they're a weird team. They just got rid of their coaching staff and replaced them at the end of the main melee. They did not make it to the tournament. They ended up finishing 5th. But Hangzhou Spark, in the last week of playing the main melee qualification, week 3, they showed magnificent improvement. Like, magnificent improvement off the back of Shy, much more organised play. It looked so much better than it had done in the previous 2 weeks, where they had lost, well, the previous week anyway, week 2, where they lost to Philly and they lost to New York. Losing to Philly is no shame. Philly are one of the best teams in the region, right? But losing to New York was a surprise. I would not have expected Hangzhou Spark to lose to New York. And that's what kind of set alarm bells ringing. But coaching staff change, and then they come into week 3, they take Shanghai to 5 maps, a game they could have won, Hangzhou Spark, and then they go and sweep the Guangzhou Charge 3-0. That's what I want to see the Hangzhou Spark doing. I want to see the Hangzhou Spark sweeping these sorts of teams like Guangzhou if they want to be up in the top 4 and getting to the end of month tournaments. So Hangzhou Spark, they rapidly impressed and got better in week 3. And I think, well, I'm almost certain that it's because of the coaching staff change. The coaching staff change is not going anywhere. So, off the back of Shy playing really well, Gujue playing more, and then the new coaching staff coming in, the whole team just looking better. I think the Guangzhou Charge are going to, the Hangzhou Spark are going to get much better results in the June Joust. Again, it's meta dependent, don't get me wrong. There will be a hero pool in the June Joust, which will make a difference. I'm doing this prior to the hero pool's release, so it's a little bit awkward. We can make some assumptions, like perhaps Winston being banned, maybe, but maybe D.Va gets banned. You know, it's one tank, one support and 2 DPS. I would be fairly confident that either McCree or Ashe gets banned. So, if you have, say, McCree banned, and we go into a heavy Ashe meta, that would be incredible for Hangzhou Spark, considering how cracked Shy is on the Ashe. So, it's going to be a little bit meta dependent, but I still think the Hangzhou Spark are going to get a lot better. And that's what, in my opinion, puts them above Chengdu. I think they will be a little bit more organised. They won't get drawn into Chengdu's game. We've not seen the Hangzhou Spark go up against Chengdu yet. We will do in the June Joust, no doubt. So that will be probably quite a spicy match. And we're going to have to monitor it and see how Hangzhou improve over time with their new coaching staff. But I think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. That leaves us with our top 3 though. In third, I have Seoul Dynasty. Seoul, they are nice and consistent in the off-season. In the off-season? Of course they're consistent in the off-season. There's no matches played. They are nice and consistent in the regular season. They had some really nice results. They lost to Philly. It was their only match that they lost. They can improve from that. But they swept the Guangzhou Charge, which is exactly what you want to see them do. They swept the New York Excelsior and they swept the Valiant. That's exactly what you want. Dropped one map in the entirety of the lead-up, which is, well, the map against Philadelphia. which is exactly what you want. But when it came to the knockouts, they fell short, and that's unfortunate. So Seoul, they've got a little bit of work to do to get up with, I believe, Shanghai and Philadelphia, but they can get there. And I think they will be regular features in the June Joust, etc., going down the list of tournaments that are coming up. And I wouldn't expect them not to feature. I think they're definitely a top 4 team in the East. I don't expect them to fall down and end up being with the likes of Guangzhou, New York, and the Valiant. They've got way too much skill for that. And providing they don't get into the drawn into the more scrappy games, I think they will stay above the Chengdu Hunters. So, in that case, I see them doing quite well. And that's despite Seoul losing to the Chengdu Hunters, by the way, in the knockouts of the May Melee. And the reason I say that is because as soon as you play a team twice, you know what you're dealing with in a tournament scenario from that team. And so you can learn from it. The loss to the Chengdu Hunters for Seoul Dynasty in the May Melee knockout qualifications, whatever you want to call them, it's really confusing. I believe is a learning experience for the Seoul Dynasty that they won't fall into that trap again against Chengdu. And there's plenty of VODs and information to work from now for the Seoul coaches, so that they can prepare better for the future and go up against these teams and make sure they don't fall and get better results, especially against those middle of the table teams. Leaves us with our top 2 though. In number 2, people might not like this, but it's Philadelphia Fusion. Why? Because Philly do great in the regular season. A 12-3 map record, 4-0. Only team to go 4-0 in the East. Fantastic record. But they didn't make it to the end tournament, like everyone expected. They lost in the 6th mapper to the Shanghai Dragons. Philly didn't play atrociously in that match. I will put that out there. Carpe and Rascal, Rascal was shut down so well by Izayaki Sleeps mainly in that game that it made it very difficult for him to get any value. Izayaki played out of his mind in that series. It's you can't get around that, and Izayaki really stepped up when it came to tournament play. So that's a rough one, but at the end of the day, you have to take into account that whatever you say, Philly didn't make it. Whether that's a Philly choke, whether that's Shanghai ascending to a next level of play, which in my opinion it's more Shanghai ascending to the next level of play than Philly choking. Philly didn't play badly, they didn't choke it. Shanghai just ascended and outdid them. Simple as that. It was an incredibly close series. So I don't think Philly are bad. I think these top 2 are really, really close. Really close. And it's going to be such a phenomenal match when they meet up again. It really, really is. There's going to be tons of stuff in there. Philly have now nailed down Toby and Hopper as well. So that's going to be a big bonus for them going forward. And especially if they get people like Finding Astro back, then they may go forward to even higher things. But I don't think they're going to come back anytime soon. So I think we're stuck with this Old Korean Philadelphia Fusion, which is going to do very well. However, I can't justify putting them above my first place team right now, which is Shanghai Dragons. I didn't think, in all honesty, the Shanghai Dragons would be returning to the top of my East power rankings. Especially going into the May Melee knockouts. I was not expecting Shanghai to be up there. And Shanghai, all credit to them. To be honest, they stepped up and they massively improved in the knockouts to, beat some really good teams. Like Philadelphia Fusion is an incredible team to be knocking out, right? And then they go on to the finals. They not only beat Florida once, but they beat them again. And it shows learning from the Shanghai Dragons. They beat Florida 3-2. Then, the next time they meet Florida, after they've been put down by Dallas into the loser's bracket, they meet Florida again and absolutely smack them 3-0. Like, The only 3-0 that was achieved during those finals of the main melee. That has to be, you have to take them into account and say well done to the coaches of Shanghai Dragons, Moon and everyone. They learnt and they changed things to make sure that they weren't caught out. There was only one team better than them in the main melee, and that was Dallas Fuel. And honestly, that's for the NA video, but you know, Dallas Fuel are quite one hell of a team right now. And that's no shame to Shanghai for losing out to them. They lost out to them twice though. But putting Shanghai right now up against anyone else in that region, I don't see much better. The only team I can see ascending above the Shanghai Dragons right now is Philadelphia Fusion, and that may only be in the regular season. It may not be in those tournament scenarios where Shanghai seem to have this little bit of clutch that only run out against Dallas. So Shanghai are still one of the best teams around. We had our doubts coming into 2021, but this May Melee has proved that Shanghai are still one of the top teams around. Even though they only achieved a 4th place in the East standings, they still had a 3-1 record and were lagging behind Chengdu and Seoul by a map differential only. That has changed now with the tournament win and the points that is given by the tournament win. They are now top of the East standings. The East standings are Shanghai, Philadelphia, Seoul, Chengdu, Hangzhou, Guangzhou, New York, and then Valiant. So big props to the Shanghai Dragons for stepping up in the knockout when it really, really mattered. And it's going to be interesting in the June Joust to see exactly what happens in the East region, especially if the hero pulls force teams away from Dive. Because if they do, then Philadelphia Fusion could roll big time. Because they are the best Brawl team in the East, without a doubt. Because they're not really an East team, are they? Anyway, I am going to leave it here for this one. The next video will be the West Power Rankings, which are going to be even more interesting than these. Because, my goodness me, where do you rank the Shock? Where do you rank the Shock right now? Oh boy, it's going to be super interesting, but no spoilers. We're going to leave that until the next video. All the socials are linked in the video description as ever for Illusion Gaming and myself. Make sure you check them out, give them a follow, etc. Twitter, Twitch, and Discord. Make sure you join the servers. I will be back again, obviously, for the NA West Power Rankings in the next video. But for now, thank you guys so much for this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then!